Thank you very much, Will, and the panel. Fascinating discussion, and I'm not going to keep us waiting any longer because I think this is going to be a real highlight of today's program. I am delighted to be able to welcome the relatively recently appointed Chairman of the United States Federal Trade Commission, Chairman Andrew Ferguson, to now deliver a keynote speech. I think we are all waiting with anticipation. We've all seen already the very ambitious program of activity that you have well underway at the FTC, and we're really, really keen to hear more from you. I know, Chairman Ferguson, you come with a wealth of experience that goes well beyond antitrust borders, including your role, for example, recently as Solicitor General of the Commonwealth of Virginia, your role supporting Senate Leader McConnell, and your role on the Senate Judicial Committee. A fascinating range of experience, as well, obviously, as your experience previously working in private practice. But we all want to hear about your priorities and your objectives for the Federal Trade Commission. So please welcome Chairman Andrew Ferguson to the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah, for that kind introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here in Scotland, which holds a special place in my heart. In case you couldn't tell from my last name or what I look like, my ancestors hail from Scotland. And my staff can confirm that I maintain an intimate familiarity with the spirits this nation offers as well. To quote the incomparable Rabbie Burns, "O thou, my muse, good old Scotch drink." But Scotland isn't just where my forefathers hail. Not far from here lies Adam Smith, who is likely more responsible than any other person for why we're here today. It was Smith, after all, who was one of the first men of his time to warn that the monopolists can sell their commodities much above the natural price and raise their emoluments, whether they consist in wages or profit, greatly above their natural rate. There's a through line from Smith's observations on the free market mechanism to a recommendation in 2000 by a US working group called the International Competition Policy Advisory Committee, or ICPAC. The ICPAC's report advised in part that the United States explore a global competition initiative, a forum for collaboration and consultation among interested government officials and non-governmental participants on competition law and policy. I'm proud that some of my country's great thinkers helped pave the way for our gathering this week, and that their ideas served as the catalyst for the ICN, which the United States, along with competition law agencies from 13 other jurisdictions, founded in 2001. We're now well into our third decade of the ICN, and it's remarkable to see what the network has accomplished thus far. For example, we've achieved substantial alignment across the globe on the appropriate procedures for antitrust investigations, and have elevated the recognition of due process as a critical shared value in antitrust enforcement. Today, I'd like to offer my thoughts on what I hope will be yet another value we can share, namely an enforcement-forward competition framework that promotes innovation and growth. The way we approach competition, particularly in digital markets, has profound effects on all of our nation's futures. Recent revelations about the state of the AI race means that now is a decisive moment for all of our countries. And the deregulatory rallying cry heard in my country, and which is receiving quarter in some parts of Europe now, is critical to heed. Competition enforcers around the globe have a friend in the United States. That is not to say we will not have our differences. I'll address those shortly. But President Donald Trump and his administration are committed to robust competition law enforcement. This administration's economic mandate is broad, but it focuses on promoting human flourishing by creating a dynamic business environment. And that environment is characterized by increasing innovation, productivity, and growth. The fruits of that economy will be enjoyed by all Americans, not just the powerful and connected. It is also focused intensely on the welfare of the American worker. Vigorous and effective competition law enforcement is a key component of achieving this dynamic and pro-worker economy. Although I credit Scotland and the United Kingdom with helping birth capitalism, I must give my home country some praise for its long history of understanding the threats posed to human flourishing by monopoly and collusion. The author of our nation's first antitrust statute, Senator John Sherman, famously declared that if we will not endure a king as a political power, We should not endure a king over the production, transportation, and sale of any necessities of life. Sherman was a Republican like me. It was, after all, the Republican Party, the conservative party, that most effectively dealt with the problems presented by the trusts. That our nation's most important antitrust law bears the name of a Republican legislator is a point of pride for my party. And my party, as well as this administration, is rediscovering the wisdom of taking competition enforcement seriously. This rediscovery hinges on a critical insight. The purpose of society is to promote the flourishing of its members. Government tyranny and abuse is a well-known danger to that flourishing, but so are private monopolies and cartels. In some cases, private aggregations of power can match government tyranny as a threat to human flourishing. This was the experience that led to the creation of the American antitrust laws. The trusts wielded tremendous economic power and could use that power to command higher prices, to reduce output, to drive down wages, to block new and innovative entrants to markets, and to degrade product quality. Monopolies and cartels thus inflict concrete harms on the welfare of consumers and workers and deny them their opportunity to reach their full potential. Monopolies and cartels, of course, do not inflict merely economic harms. They can inflict social and political harms as well. Economic power can be leveraged into political power, and that political power can warp democracy. We have seen this danger play out in the United States with big tech. Especially in 2020, platforms with tremendous economic power use that power to censor political speech on critically important topics. The origins of COVID, the efficacy of masks and vaccines, human sexuality, and the 2020 US presidential election. The antitrust laws do not address censorship or political power directly, but by protecting the welfare of consumers and workers, the antitrust laws address economic power. If enforcers are committed to protecting consumers and workers from concrete harms inflicted by the abuse of economic power, they will have the effect of protecting society from powerful firms that would leverage that economic power into political power. As competition enforcers, we focus every day on the importance of promoting innovation, vibrancy, and competition from the abuse of private power. But I urge you today not to lose sight of the very real fact that government regulation can be the enemy of competition, vibrancy, innovation, and resiliency, no less than the unlawful exercise of economic power. Regulation, whether intended to or not, can lead to the same kind of threat to human flourishing as the abuse of private power. Antitrust law has traditionally taken an ex post rather than ex ante approach to enforcement. If business conduct inflicts concrete harms on consumers or workers, and the enforcers can muster sufficient evidence of those harms, then the government acts to protect workers and consumers from that conduct. This approach requires enforcers to work hard. They have to identify specific injurious conduct. They have to gather evidence that the conduct is in fact damaging the welfare of consumers and workers. And then they have to tailor the remedies to address the injury. Unless those conditions are met, antitrust leaves markets to sort out problems. No, the ex post approach will not catch every competition problem. But so long as enforcers are committed to vigorous and courageous enforcement, the precise, tailored ex post approach is preferable to the costly dragnet effect of ex ante regulation. My friend and colleague, Gail Slater at the US Justice Department, has likened ex ante regulation to a sledgehammer, whereas ex post antitrust enforcement is a scalpel. I know it has become de rigueur in circles like this to raise Mr. Draghi's report, but he is right. Burdensome regulations make it difficult for small businesses to achieve the scale they need to compete. They can kill new, innovative ideas in the cradle. They discourage capital investment, and they can impose second-order effects that compound their costs in ways unimaginable to the regulator when he's acting. They pose another problem that should alarm us all as antitrust enforcers as well. Regulations, whether issued by legislatures or technocrats, can be a tool by which incumbent firms exclude potential rivals. Regulatory capture is very real. I saw it as the senior-most Republican lawyer in the US Senate. Powerful firms will spend tremendous resources convincing regulators and legislators to adopt a suite of rules that have the effect of increasing their rivals' costs or excluding them entirely. Firms will often present those proposed rules as sensible, reasonable, or even necessary. but these proposals are often carefully crafted to promote and insulate monopoly. Even when the regulator believes he is doing the right thing, he is often damaging competition in ways he does not understand. As Mr. Draghi's report explained, the European regulatory regime has contributed to economic stagnation, dwindling productivity, and high levels of unemployment in parts of Europe. In almost every category by which one would assess competitiveness, Europe lags in some way behind the United States. Obviously, the sources of the differences between economic outcomes in the United States and Europe and in other countries is overdetermined. But there's no doubt that Europe's heavy regulatory hand is at least partially to blame. Unfortunately, I fear this regulatory impulse has seeped into competition law. I think this is a potentially dangerous development. Consider the DMA. The law relies on rigid criteria to identify in the first instance the companies and their services that are subject to its complex and burdensome rules. To date, 5 of the 7 gatekeepers are US firms, and only 1 originated in Europe, a fact that is itself evidence of the heavy costs of regulation on growing a business to scale. The DMA lacks the finesse that a typical competition law assessment would entail. It also lacks the tailoring of remedies to specific injuries to identifiable workers or consumers. Should the company be deemed in violation, the DMA on its face allows bureaucrats to assess escalating fines up to a certain percentage of the company's worldwide turnover, not their European turnover. Of course, enforcers have discretion to assess fines below the cap, but the law is written in such a way that permits regulators to extend their reach beyond Europe to conduct taking place elsewhere. And as a result, companies may conform their conduct to European rules beyond European markets. This is the Brussels effect in action. Now, I do not say this to chide. We all have important lessons to learn from the consequences of our divergent approaches. I've had conversations with some of you in my office in Washington about what makes the United States an innovator compared to some other countries around the world. We're a nation of risk takers and pioneers, risk embracers, really. Our innovators exhibit the key quality of underpinning their entrepreneurial spirit, meaning they shrug off failure and are unashamed and unafraid to try again. In fact, we encourage and expect it. That's how new breakthrough ideas come to market. Free-flowing capital certainly helps as well. Ultimately, businesses that have the capability to transform our lives for the better and to promote the flourishing of all members of society grow and succeed in the United States because they face fewer regulations and regulators than elsewhere. Now, I am sympathetic to the motivations that contribute to the adoption of competition regulations, particularly in digital markets. Competition law enforcement against big tech is difficult and expensive. I know this better than most. For example, it took more than 5 years from the beginning of the investigation to bring the FTC's current case against Meta to trial. And I am concerned with platforms who collect taxes on innovators or maintain monopoly power by steering consumers away from innovative competitors. Both practices can represent serious threats to growth and innovation, and we must pay close attention to them. And where appropriate and sustained by evidence, we should enforce our competition laws against them. And I'm not categorically opposed to regulation, to be clear. It's appropriate for legislatures from time to time to revisit our competition laws, to clarify or refine the conduct they prohibit, or to clarify and refine appropriate remedies. My own country is having debates about whether tailored regulations enacted by our Congress are necessary to address harms in specific markets or for very specific conduct. These are good debates to have, and there may be circumstances where narrow and tailored regulations are appropriate. But we should still prefer the scalpel of enforcement to the sledgehammer of regulation. That approach has yielded fruit in the United States. Vigorous enforcement by state and federal authorities, both of which I've participated in, as well as private antitrust suits, have produced important judicial decisions on anti-competitive conduct in digital markets. I therefore remain of the view that vigorous ex post enforcement is generally preferable to regulation. Instead of chiding, I urge all of us to apply the lessons we have learned from overregulation to the most important question we confront today as competition enforcers: what to do about artificial intelligence. AI technology shows remarkable promise. It could be a driving force for innovation, economic growth, and increased productivity for workers in the coming years. It could also pose the first real competitive challenge to big tech incumbents in decades. With this nascent technology still in the cradle, I fear that a knee-jerk regulatory response will only squelch innovation, further entrench big tech incumbents, and perhaps even ensure that AI innovators will move to jurisdictions friendlier to them, but perhaps hostile to our nations and our shared interests. I fear that if we confront AI with the regulatory sledgehammer, we will break it and deny our citizens its potential promise. Instead, we should proceed with caution. We ought not to assume the worst possible outcomes from AI and regulate on the basis of those potential outcomes. Instead, as competition enforcers, we should use our trusted law enforcement tools and watch carefully the development of this new technology. Where we see AI abused to injure the welfare of consumers or workers, we should intervene. But we ought not to assume those outcomes. We should let the technology develop and confront problems as they arise, just as competition enforcers have been doing with new technologies and in new markets for more than a century. It is important that policymakers and competition law enforcers across the globe work together to open avenues for greater investment and innovation in the digital space, especially with respect to AI. If we can work together to unlock the tremendous, enormous potential of AI by promoting a regulatory environment that permits greater technological and business experimentation, we can all benefit. The way forward, then, is to recognize that the benefits of the digital revolution are not zero-sum. Provided we come to a shared understanding of the regulatory framework that promotes business dynamism, technological innovation, and the welfare of consumers and workers, the digital revolution presents exceptional opportunities for all of us. Through a shared commitment to a fairer and more open regulatory regime and a predominantly ex-post approach by competition enforcers across the globe, we can forge new ways to work together to unlock the full potential of our respective tech sectors, comprised of businesses both big and small, to the common benefit of each of our respective peoples. I want to close with a clear message, and I'm going to end early, so it's a first for today. America First does not mean America alone. The bonds we share predate my nation's founding, and in many ways our destinies have been intertwined, which is precisely what gives me hope for our collective future. Tomorrow, for example, we will commemorate the 80th anniversary of our civilization's triumph over the enemies of human flourishing. Today, the stakes for our collective civilization could not be higher. I stand here as a partner with an open hand, and I have little doubt that we will all meet this moment together. Thank you all, and I look forward to continuing our conversations here in Edinburgh.